This is section 10, migrating from a monolith to a microservices architecture. In this section, we're going to take a look at when does it make sense to use microservices, different strategies for migrating from a monolith to a microservices architecture, and the saga pattern. This is video 1, strategies for migrating from a monolith to a microservices architecture, part 1. In this video, we're going to take a look at when it makes sense to use a microservices architecture and use cases for a single microservice. If you're planning on migrating to a microservices architecture, the first thing you need to consider is you need to evaluate why will you be using microservices and if you really need them. Don't use microservices just because they're fashionable. In fact, you can quote me on this. Don't ever use a technology or architecture just because it's fashionable. What you need to consider when evaluating a new technology is what are its strengths and weaknesses, what are the use cases it excels at, and in particular, what problems that it solves, and how well it solves those problems, and what are the trade-offs that you are making when choosing that technology. Microservices are a scalability pattern. Microservice architectures allow you to be able to handle more load in your system by scaling different parts of your system independently, being able to separate work across different teams with clearly defined responsibilities, and also being able to, with minimum work, use the same backend architecture to serve different types of front-end applications. We have seen this throughout the course, but I wanted to repeat it. It's also a good moment to actually review the video on section 1 that talks about how architectures grow. There is a saying in the industry, which is actually from Martin Fowler, which is you need to be this tall to use microservices. This is essentially true. If you have a very small team of developers and only one main application with very small load, you really shouldn't be using microservices. However, there are still use cases for a microservice rather than a full-blown microservice architecture that you could use. Two basic cases would be, for example, to use a session service, a microservice, to be able to scale horizontally an application. So instead of using Redis directly, use a microservice that uses Redis from Memcache and provides a REST endpoint and maybe have some extra logic. Another one would be to provide access to data that has been batch processed. I give you an example. We have here the Last.fm page from Team Maya, and here we have related artists or similar artists. To do that, what you generally have to do is, I don't know how Last.fm does it, but you would look at all the scrubbles, all the listens from all the different users and find out which ones have seen Team Maya and also other users, and you rank them based on which ones are similar, and then you do something like that. I once implemented a system that did something very similar. It was a very naive implementation of a collaborative filtering algorithm that used a very complex SQL query. Our database had more than 3 million records, and this was like 12 years ago, and we were running on very cheap least commodity hardware. We were really constrained on resources. But what happened is that I'll repeat this, the SQL query was really complex. And so what happened was that the database grinded to a halt. So what I did is I had to pre-compute the results and serve them from a cache. So this is an excellent example of something you could solve with a microservice. You could pre-compute the results from a DB replica and load them to something like Redis and serve them from a REST web service.